And so friends and enemies of the UK in the list. Are any of them a reason to renew Trident? Let's talk to George Galloway, the Respect MP for Bradford West, an opponent of Trident, and Professor Anthony Glees, Director of the Centre for Security and Intelligence at the University of Buckingham. Professor Anthony Glees first, what worries you most about that list?
Well, what worries me most about that list is that it's growing. It's growing all the time. And what it suggests is that the world is an even more dangerous place now than it was 30 years ago during the Cold War, that more and more people are going to, more and more states, more and more unpleasant, vindictive, spiteful leaders like Kim Jong-un, like Saddam Hussein will be after nuclear weapons, and therefore David Cameron isn't telling porkies. He's absolutely right. We should go for Trident. We should keep Trident. We should renew Trident, and that will keep this country much, much safer than if we got shot of it. OK, George Galloway, can you answer that?
Well, I wouldn't know where to begin to answer that, and the incredibly selective roundup that you began the show with, Jeremy.
Well, size order.
First of all, North Korea has never threatened us, but we have invaded Korea in my lifetime. It may not be in the younger listeners' ken that we actually invaded and divided Korea. We are a part of an international series of sanctions and bullying of North Korea, which is pushing them into a corner. Number two, they don't have any nuclear weapons that can hit either the United States or us, and given the impoverishment of the North Korean state, are very, very unlikely ever to acquire them. But thirdly, I'm against all nuclear weapons, and it's precisely for the reason that they must produce proliferation that I'm against them. Because if you don't want to be invaded by the United States, the only way to be sure you won't be is if you do have nuclear weapons. Iraq was invaded because it had no weapons of mass destruction. Korea cannot be invaded because it does have weapons of mass destruction. It's a pretty remorseless logic. And lastly, because I fear you're about to terminate me,
never.
Iran has never threatened to wipe Israel off the map. This canard has been disproved by every professor of Farsi from Tokyo to Buckingham. It's simply a lie. And the more often it's repeated, sadly, the more often people like your respected show appear to believe it.
Anthony Glees, if we look more closely, George, you're saying there isn't really a threat anywhere there.
Well, I've been called many things in my professional career, but never a professor of Farsi, whatever that might be. But no, I think Kim Jong-un needs to be careful if he's got George Galloway as his champion. I think of the way that Saddam Hussein thought that George Galloway was a good champion to have. Now, the fact of the matter is that proliferation is a problem. There, I must say, George Galloway is not wrong. States that have nuclear weapons do not attack and do not get attacked on the whole.
But if proliferation is the problem, Anthony, why are we taking part in it?
Well, because we are already a nuclear power.
Well, then stop.
We see ourselves. Well, if we were to stop, we would be giving up something that we have. We are
expensive.
A country. Well, excuse me, it's very cheap. That Trident is an absolute bargain.
Is it?
Absolutely. They say it would cost about £20 billion to replace it. And just remember that in 2012, taxpayers spent over £200 billion on social security payments. So keeping this country safe, keeping our global reach to protect our global interests is actually a bargain with Trident.
George Galloway.
Well, he's obviously not a professor of logic or Farsi, because the idea that because you already have nuclear weapons, you're not guilty of proliferation when you renew them. But if you don't have nuclear weapons and seek them, you are guilty of proliferation. It's simply illogical nonsense. We should be building down their weapons stocks, not building them up. And the view I'm expressing against Trident happens to be shared by the past 2 chiefs of staff of the British Armed Forces. It's shared by many conservatives, crusty conservatives, who are every bit as militaristic as your professor, but happen to think that spending not 20, but 80 billion pounds over the life of the programme is not value for money. We're sacking soldiers. We're keeping their wives in hutches that you wouldn't put a dog in. We're sending them to war, ill-clad, ill-armed, and unable properly to protect themselves, precisely because such a vast proportion of our military budget is being spent on nuclear weapons that logic dictates can never be used.
But you said that North Korea weren't a threat, and just in the last few days they've been threatening the USA and South Korea, George.
But it's the United States that's threatening them in South Korea, in the seas around the Korean Peninsula, in their bases in Japan, and most importantly, in the fact that the United States invaded Korea with literally millions of soldiers. More than 1 million American soldiers did Korea.
Okay, Anthony Glees.
Well, I would just say it's completely the other way round. The threat, as everybody, apart from George Galloway, understands, comes from this trumped-up little dictator in North Korea. He's spiteful, he's inexperienced, and indeed that is the danger. It's a general truth that those states who have nuclear weapons will not use them. But where you've got somebody who is capable of behaving irrationally, who has no real experience of statecraft, the great fear that everybody sensible will have is that something will go wrong. There will be one slip up and weapons will start being hurled at each other. And that is a reason for those countries that are strong, who do have nuclear weapons, who have long experience of managing nuclear weapons, should put all the pressure they can on North Korea to rejoin the peaceful community of nations.
Thank you very much.
And not listen to George Galloway.
Professor Anthony Glees of University of Buckingham, and George Galloway, Respect MP for Bradford West and opponent of Trident. There we go.